Hello, everyone. Welcome to From London with Love with me, Lin Clive, on ALB UK TV. Today, we are joined by the co-founder of Sona Circle. Hello, Archie.
Hi, how's it going?
Everything is good. Thank you so much for being with us today.
No problem, my pleasure.
So Archie, I met you before through the Sona talk, which will, through the interview, we'll talk about it more. But at the start, as you are the co-founder for the Sona Circle, tell us more about it. So what is Sona Circle?
Okay, yeah, sure. Sona Circle is a refugee recruitment agency. It's specifically looking after refugees. So the plan is that we're helping socially conscious employers around the UK and pairing them with the right and the best refugee talent that we find in the UK. So that's basically what we do. There's another arm that we look at called Sona Talks, and that's a platform which I'm sure you're familiar with, that basically allow refugee voices, but then also people who work within the third sector and work with refugees to tell people really what's going on and to let them tell their stories. So it's kind of twofold. And then we just launched a T-shirt campaign called Equal Tees, which is promoting equality both in the workplace, but also in the wider society.
So when you say it is a recruitment agency, is it through an application or a website?
Yeah, so if you go to sonacircle.com, there's a whole program on there of how we do our recruitment process, what jobs are available, our partners that we're working with. So everything is there on sonacircle.com.
I'm interested to know the background story for Sona Circle, the idea, how it started.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I'm sure you're aware, back in 2015, there was one of the largest displacement in human history. So 4 million refugees were sent to Europe, fleeing violence and various other things from Syria and further around the world. So what happened was that we were kind of thinking at the time, we need to do something about this because there's all these people who don't have access to the same sort of security and services that we do. What can we do to help in this situation? So me and my co-founder, we visited Greece, and we went to the island of Lesbos, as well as and Athens as well, and we went to refugee camps. We went to Germany, went to Copenhagen, and Cyprus as well, and visited camps there and community centers, and interviewed refugees who were going through that process as to what the real problems were once they had been resettled. What was the next step? So as a result of that, we found the most common answer was we need to be able to provide for ourselves. So what we did was created Sona Circle as an agency to help refugees get back into work, but working with sensitive and socially conscious employers to make that a reality.
So just to kind of summarize, so you work with private sectors, right?
Yeah, private sectors. So we're looking at private organizations.
Can you give some examples?
What, in terms of companies?
Type of jobs, or for a story when you've been able to help a refugee to find a job?
Yeah, so we worked with a dentist actually from Syria who had obviously had been displaced. So when he came over, he contacted us, and we were able to sort of work with him and put him in touch with the right people to help convert his qualifications, take the retraining exams, and then eventually get him a place within one of the a dentistry that he was working at. So yeah,
amazing job. So there is just for clarification, when you say a refugee, I know the answer, but I want it from you and for the benefit of the viewers. So when you say a refugee, how it's different to asylum seeker and how it's different to any other like migration or whatever terms used. Would you be able to explain it more to us, please?
Sure. So a refugee is a status that is granted to somebody who is fleeing violence, religious persecution, who have a well-founded fear that they cannot go home. So an asylum seeker is someone who is seeking asylum, but they haven't been granted refugee status as yet. So what we are doing and what how we support that is we look after refugees at that point once they've had they've been granted that status, and then we can help them get back into the job market as quickly as possible.
And I'm sure with this type of I don't know, job as you are volunteers, by the way, that's really important point. You all work as volunteers, right?
Yeah, so it started with a couple of us, and it has expanded now. So we've actually got 2 full-time members of staff, but again, unpaid. And then we've got between 12 and 20 volunteers at any one time over the last 3.5 years since we've been doing this. Everybody just seems to want to get involved, I guess.
That's amazing. I'm sure everything comes with some difficulties. So what are the difficulties you faced when you are creating Sona Circle, or currently what's happening?
So one of the biggest things that we've faced in the UK is public perception and obviously media coverage. So a lot of people have comes together with migrants and refugees and think it's the same thing. So there's been a negative press coverage over this over a number of years. So we do get a lot of pushback and resistance as to people saying, okay, well, can these people work? Are they legally allowed to work? And then obviously there's other subtler, more deeper issues such as, inequality and racism throughout, making sure that we have the right people to promote, refugee situations. So, yeah.
Has a big impact on how people see refugees.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it does. So one of the things, like I said, that we constantly face is constant pushback from people to say, okay, well, there's a lot of, I don't know, I could say this discrimination, there's prejudice about migrants generally, and I think that's been promoted through the press, through the media. And then obviously there's the general fear of someone else, fear of other, that we don't know where these people are. And then obviously within the West, there's been sustained campaigns over the years to demonize and fearful of people who essentially are just like you and me. So that's been one of the biggest things, is trying to change that perception of people.
How do you think we can change it?
So I think things like this, so having conversations, meeting people. There was a guy that we had at the Sona Talks event last year, who's a psychologist and a lecturer, and he wrote this book called Other, Charles Fernyhough. And one of the things he mentioned as in his research was that just imagining, just getting to know and hearing the stories of people, understanding that, there is very little difference, basically genetic lottery, where you were born in the world, that separates you and I. So one of the first things we can do is just get that word out, just like have people talk and share their stories is the first step, I think. Allowing people to empathize, to put themselves in someone else's shoes. And then I think that snowballs, because then once you are sensitive and sympathetic to those situations, you can then create solutions to the problems that we are facing. So whether it's creating jobs, whether it's just creating general opportunities for refugees and people to come in and integrate into a system and not put roadblocks and barriers at every step that they have to go. So, yeah.
And the Sona Talk is one way. So how often do you do the Sona Talk? It's yearly, and how many years have you been doing it for?
So we've done 2 now, so we're still in our infant stages, if I'm honest with you. Last year's one was a resounding success. We were really thrilled with the turnout and the support that we got from it. It raised a lot of sort of eyebrows, and people were like, oh, actually, I didn't know this about refugees. And since then, we've had the attendees, and as well as some of the organizations, we've kept the dialogue going, and it's opened up new avenues for us to help the other work that we do of getting people into jobs, and companies are now sort of trying to change their approach and have more of a refugee friendly employment strategy, as well as just trying to generally do more for these communities that are marginalized and, that are.
Now with COVID, you think like what's going to happen in terms of these talks?
So what we did this year because of COVID was we took them online, and we had significantly more. Obviously, it was at an event space before, so we were limited to how many people were able to attend. But since then, through the videos online, and also all the Instagram lives that we did, we had well over a couple of thousand people, so almost like a tenfold increase in the amount of people who were interested and who were participating in that. Now, going forward, I don't know, if I'm honest with you, it all depends on how we go back to having wider scale events with social distancing. We don't know what that looks like just yet, but we'll definitely keep you posted, and follow us on social media and see what we're. Yeah.
In terms of COVID, we talked about how it's affecting, for example, an event in the UK, but in terms of COVID and its effect on refugees in camps, do you have information? Do you have how things are currently?
So there's been a number of different stories coming out. At the moment, the situation is really unclear. We don't quite know just how, if there's any sort of general consensus of just how badly affected they've been. The New York Times ran a story a couple of weeks ago saying that the refugee camps, that Greece were turning away refugees. Greece, who has historically housed a lot of refugees there, but we're turning people away. I imagine it will be as similar to what we've had here. So, they're trying to restrict the spread of the disease, which obviously will have a negative impact on the amount of people that these camps can serve. And obviously, because they cannot social distance within the camps, it makes it very, very difficult to stop the spread of disease within there. So at the moment, we are, I wouldn't say optimistic about stuff. We're expecting probably some negative reports to come out as a result of that. But there's not enough data at the moment, I think, that's widely reported anyway, that shows what how much the impact has been, negatively or positively. So, yeah.
And one of the things, I know it's a quite obvious question, but when we say refugees' difficulties, it's kind of like it answered itself, the question. But from you being working very closely with refugees, I want you to share some stories, without mentioning names, of course, just to struggles that refugees have. Maybe we would be able to raise more awareness about the current situations of refugees.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's like with any other situation, I'm really sort of keen to draw the parallels that a refugee scenario is like anybody else's scenario. So if you found yourself unable to go home, unable to have access to work, money, support, healthcare, all the services that we take for granted, what would that look like for you? And you can now think, okay, that's the same thing, but without the added network of support of a nation, of a country. So with some of the refugees that we've worked with, there was actually quite a good friend of mine, was actually at Yarlswood Detention Centre, and she really struggled there. The facilities were terrible, and she actually worked alongside Diane Abbott, who did some widespread and wide-scale changes there to try and change the living conditions of the women and the other people who were sort of detained at centres such as Yarlswood. But there's lack of it's just the knock-on effect. You're not able to have adequate housing, which means then you're not able to, access to food, education, your family's taking care of it. There is a number of different, it's literally like a domino effect. So whatever you can imagine in terms of like the worst case scenarios of if it was you that was displaced, what that looks like if you don't have a support network around you.
What you're doing is really great. And if people who are watching us wanted to join or help or get in contact, how can they do that?
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways. One thing that I can say about having worked in this sector for this length of time is that there are a lot of agencies out there. There's My Grateful, there's Help Refugees, and there's obviously us and other things. What we ask and advise people is do what you can. So if it's a case of donating to a refugee based organization such as ourselves, we've got a Just Giving page. Whether it's donating clothes to food banks, to clothing banks, food, anything you can do, you promote refugee well-being. There is a ton of information out there that people can do. When in terms of businesses and in the commercial sector, hire refugees. Now, obviously, with people who have been displaced, there will be gaps in their employment, but these are some of the most skilled workers. The Brookings Institute just did a report showing just how benefit a nation's economy. Denmark reported from a period of about 12 to 15 years in the, I think it was at the late 90s as well, that what actually happened was in that community, the native wages went up, right? Because some of the refugees who were doing some of the lower skilled jobs meant that it was almost like a transitioning effect. So there was an added benefit there. Obviously, there's so much investment that can go into. There's the remittance to other countries. There's local support services and everything else that you can do. So what I would advise people is just do what you can, donate, support organizations, hire refugees, whatever you can. It goes such a long way.
I hope your voice reached as the biggest number we can reach. Archie, I want to finish with you by a message from you to the people who takes refugees in a negative way. So what do you say to them, and in your own words?
It could be you.
Yeah.
Just put yourself in someone else's shoes. Think about it from a perspective of this is not someone coming to steal or take or something that is mine. These are people who have this is like if you were trying to survive. There is no difference between me and someone from Afghanistan or Iraq who have been, displaced for any reason other than genetic lottery. It is a reflection upon us as a society of how we treat the people who are in most need. So what does it say about us? Who do we want to be? Do we want to be a society that pushes people away and leaves them to suffer and to die? Or are we a society who brings people in and welcomes them and benefits from a richer, more diverse culture, new ideas, just so many benefits, from that. So anybody who thinks that a refugee or an asylum seeker is someone who is a negative thing, no, just imagine if it was you in your situation. Imagine what happens if you lost everything. What would you want people around the world to do for you, or directly within your local community, or if you were displaced in someone else's local community?
Thank you so much for your meaningful words. I will add just, it can be you. Sometimes when we see like a bad news, we always distance ourselves. I think it will never happen to me. That's very far away. But life can really change in a day. You can lose everything in a day. So maybe be more open-minded about this point.
Yeah, absolutely. The more that we can open our minds and our hearts to things, there is so much more benefit and a much richer and safer and fairer life experience for all of us. So I just wish people would take more of an open and loving approach to people who in our society who need it the most.
Thank you so much, Archie, for being my guest today.
No,
I've enjoyed interviewing you, and hopefully we'll be able to meet again in the future. And I'm big supporter for the Sona Circle.
Okay, thank you again, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. And for you, my viewers, see you next week in a new show with From London with Love with me, Link, live on ALB UK TV.